Welcome back to another video. In this one I want to talk about Portulacaria Afra Variegatea. It's also called Dwarf Jade or Elephant Bush. It comes from the Kwazulu Natal province of South Africa and is in the same family as the jade plant or the money tree Crassula ovata. It's basically a small leaved version of the jade plant, and this one is the bicolour Variegatea, so has the variegated leaves. I stumbled across this plant just recently whilst researching the video for my own jade plant, and I instantly thought it would make a great long-term project to actually turn into a bonsai tree. Now, normally in the UK and Europe, we tend to create bonsai trees from normal European species like beech, or elm, or maple, or juniper, native growing trees that we try to recreate in miniature. Now, we wouldn't normally create a bonsai tree from a succulent, mainly because you wouldn't normally find it in nature, but that doesn't mean you can't. I've created a bonsai tree from an ivy, and you'll never see a freestanding ivy tree in nature either. So there's no reason why we can't create something fun and interesting from something like a succulent. Now, this particular dwarf jade lends itself to becoming a bonsai tree because of its smaller leaves. You couldn't use the normal plant, Crassula ovata, because it has quite big leaves and you would never get the scale right. The leaves would just be far too big for the size of the tree unless you made the bonsai tree 4 or 5 foot tall, in which case it isn't really a bonsai. So when I saw how great these plants looked after a long period of time, and the stem of the plant has a really nice aged look to it and the leaves remain small, I thought it would be great fun to try and create a long-term project out of this and grow one of these plants into a bonsai. Now, I don't normally take on long-term projects very often because they take a long time. The bonsai ivy I created is at least 5 to 7 years old, and probably more if I went back and tried to figure it out. So it can take a long time, but if you've got enough patience, it can be a really rewarding thing to do, to create something from scratch and grow something into a majestic looking tree. Now, these are quite rare in the UK. I've never seen them commercially sold at any garden centre or houseplant shop, but I did manage to find a small specimen online. And as you can see, it turned up looking a bit sorry for itself. The plant's healthy enough, but it's obviously had several cuttings taken from it, and it's not the most attractive looking plant, to say the least. And it's not going to work particularly well to try and grow a bonsai from this material as it is here. So what I'm going to do is take a cutting and eventually take several from this plant once it grows bigger. There's one stem that's big enough and straight enough that will do for a cutting to begin with. So I'm going to use that main straight stem as my base material for the bonsai tree, and we can shape it as it grows into the sort of tree that will make for an interesting bonsai. Now, if you want to follow along with this project, or even grab one of these yourself, then maybe we can grow one of these together, and each time I trim it and shape it, I'll add these videos to a playlist, and so you can follow the progress all the way along. Make sure you're subscribed with that notification bell selected so you get notified every time I upload a new video. And I'll put a link down in the description for where you can grab one of these yourself, and I think it would be fun if a few people grew this alongside, and we can see if we can grow our own majestic looking bonsai in a few years' time. And obviously along the way it will still be a pleasing houseplant to own and watch grow. And I'd love to see how you're getting on with your own progress too, so maybe we'll do that as a Houseplant Hacks joint project. Let me know in the comments if you fancy joining me on this adventure. I think it will be a fun thing to do together. So let's get started with taking the cutting. So obviously this isn't really the best plant to start off our project. It's obviously had quite a few cuttings taken from it already. The shoots are coming out at all sorts of strange angles. It's just a bit of a mess, to be honest with you, but it's good healthy material, and if we're going to create a project we may as well start from absolute scratch. So we'll take a cutting. In fact, we'll probably take a few cuttings. We'll do some from this one and from this one in time, but they're a bit small really at the moment, so we'll let them grow out. and we'll deal with this main stem here, or what is the main stem now that the original one's been chopped off at some point. It's nice and straight, so a good opportunity to start off with a nice straight cutting, get it going well. I think these are fairly fast growing, so hopefully we should be able to get the basic shape fairly quickly and just let it grow out and try and shape it as and when we can. And when we do take cuttings like this, as you can see, this is why there's lots of growth at the bottom here, is every time you take a cutting you usually get another branch shooting, and because it's so small, it's shooting from the base as well. So there'll be lots more opportunities to get cuttings from this plant. You can do soil-based cuttings and water-based cuttings, so you can put these in water and watch them root in water, or you can put them into some soil and let them grow roots in the soil. Either way should be fairly straightforward. So all I'm going to do here is just snip this main shoot off at the base. There we go. So that's going to be our cutting. Now what I usually do is remove the leaves from the base, because we need a bit of space here for the roots to grow. They'll probably start rooting from these side bits anyway. This bottom part will callus over. With succulents you don't worry about it with you can see that you don't normally worry about it with normal cuttings, but with succulents, because it's quite wet at the very end here, it's better to wait sort of 24 or 48 hours for this wet end to callus over, because what you don't want is to get any rot in the plant, because if this end starts rotting in the soil, for example, then the whole plant's just going to rot out and die. So the best thing to do with succulents is just to leave this for 24 or 48 hours. That end bit will dry out and then you can start using it. It's kind of the opposite of what you would do with normal cuttings. You would normally try to get them as fresh as possible and in the ground or in the water as soon as possible, but it's slightly different with succulents. But there we are. This is our first this is our first cutting. It's quite exciting actually. I think the leaves on this are very pretty, and the fact that they're nice and small is going to give us an opportunity to make a really interesting project. Alrighty, so we're here in the potting shed and we've given this guy 24 hours to dry over the end a little bit. As it's a succulent, it's a good idea to just give it time to dry up, so when you plant it, it doesn't rot. That's the idea. So what I'm going to do is make up a bit of a free draining potting mix for it. If you haven't got the bits that you need to do this, then you can just use a cactus mix. A free draining cactus mix will do fine for it, but I've got the bits, so I tend to like to make up my own stuff. I've got some organic rooting powder. You don't really need it, especially with these guys. They apparently can root very prolifically. They're like basically the same family as the jade, Kwazulu ovata, which is very easy to propagate, so I don't think we're going to have any issue. But I just thought I'd show you that it's a good thing to have in the shed if you are taking a lot of cuttings, because it really gives your plants the best opportunity to develop roots and not damp off. As you can see, I've had this for literally years, and it probably cost me less than, you know, £5, $6, something like that. Probably less, probably £3, something like that. So really it's the sort of thing, it's just handy to have because it's so little money and it's good to have hanging around. Just like a lot of this stuff, you can buy it once and it does keep for a long period of time. So like this, I've always got some perlite around, 50% off at the time, probably in the New Year sale last year or something, and it literally lasts so long. It probably was even the year before. They last a long time, so pick them up while they're cheap, and you've always got something for projects and different things to do. So I've got this big plastic pot. I'm just going to use this to mix up the compost. No other reason. It's just easier to show you. So I've just got some multi-purpose sort of compost in here. I'm actually going to use one of these size pots because it's not a big cutting, so it's not going to need much more than that. Here we've got horticultural grit sand, which will just provide the drainage, and it will keep the medium open and allow the water to go through, rather than this sort of clumping over time and being kind of impermeable. And what it will do is it will hold on to the moisture. This is kind of designed, a lot of the houseplant mix are designed to hold on to the moisture for the roots, but with succulents we want it to be as free draining as possible, so we can add some of this to aid that. It's basically like sand with additional sort of bits of gravel in it. That's basically all it is. Let's see if I can get that closer for you. See, it's just got bits of gravel in it, and all this has been pre-washed and graded, so you're never going to get massive pieces in here, and it's been washed to make sure there's no nasties in there. But you could use building sand, for example. This is actual horticultural grit that's no different to building grit or something. You could probably get a massive sack for the same price as I paid for that, but you know, if you're on a budget, that's something you can look at. Sharp sand, not you get different varieties and grading of sand, but you want the gritty type. So just gonna mix that in there, have a bit more. You almost want equal parts really to make a really good free draining mix, just sort of like a third potting compost, a third grit, and then I'm going to put a third perlite as well, just to keep it really open. So a bit more of that, and then we've got the perlite. Does the same thing, keeps the soil open. Looks like that. You've probably seen it in some houseplant mixes, speckled through white stuff. It's perlite, and that can just go in there as well, and it kind of looks like that. Again, it provides oxygen for the roots by keeping the soil medium open. The water can pass through, plenty of oxygen for the roots, which means the roots grow strongly, which means the plant grows strongly, and you can water regularly, but it doesn't sit there, it goes through, which is what you want. The mix wants to stay relatively dry most of the time. A little bit more of that, and I think that's probably about right. Maybe a bit more grit. Doesn't have to be precise, but that looks good to me. So just got a small pot that I'm reusing, got it from somewhere else. It's about right. Now, handy thing about these rooting powders, if you wonder what this big thing is there, it's kind of your dibber that's included. You call it a dibber because you kind of do that with it, and that will provide your hole in the compost, so you're not damaging the stem of your plant by ramming it in. Try not to ram it into the soil, because potentially you can damage a plant by doing that. And literally, I'm going to go in there carefully, fill in the hole. Gently firm it down. The job is a good one. Now let's see if we can get the focus on the plant for once. How's it looking? I might take off those lower leaves just so they're not sat in the compost. It's going to be a really dry mix anyway, so that's probably not a big issue, but you don't really want any leaves touching the soil if you can help it, just because you don't want to encourage any rot on the plant at all. So that is as easy as it is. I wouldn't be in a hurry to water it. Again, it's a succulent. If this was any other cutting, water it well, and then it has an opportunity to start off strong. But with the succulents, less is more when it comes to water. There is going to be some moisture in that houseplant mix anyway. There will be some natural moisture in there, which means there's still some residual moisture in this mix. You can feel it's a little bit damp. That's enough for now. I'm going to give it a few weeks just to establish itself. and then give it a little bit of water to encourage the roots and to be able to uptake some water into the plant. But I made sure I watered this plant you know, a few days before I'm taking the cuttings. So as you can see, all the leaves and the stem are quite turgid, quite full of water already, and being a succulent, there's plenty of moisture within this plant. It's not going to need it anytime soon because it has its reserves in the stem and in the leaves. You know when it's getting really dry, because these leaves, rather than being firm, they're going to start getting floppy and maybe start wilting. A few leaves might fall off and the whole thing might just generally look a little bit limp. That's when you know that it's running out of its water supplies. But to get this one going, I'm just going to leave this like this. I may take these two off just so they're not touching the ground. And that's it. Keep it out of direct sunlight. You don't really want to stress the plant too much, so you can keep it in a relatively bright location, but nowhere near direct sun for a while, probably 6 to 8 weeks. It needs to get those roots established. So don't expect to see any changes for at least 4 to 6 weeks. The roots will start to come out of the bottom of the stem and into the soil, and it needs to create a strong root base before it grows anymore. As soon as you start seeing more growth on the top of this plant or any other additional leaves, then you know it's got roots. It won't start growing until the roots are established. So keep it out of the way, water it every couple of weeks, not too much, just a little bit. It should drain through on a mix like this anyway, and yeah, that will be fine for this. Give it a good month or so, maybe 2 months, and then it should be absolutely fine. Now that's the soil version of propagation for the Portulacaria Afra. Now what we will also do is try the water propagation as well. I'm going to take a cutting, put it in water, and you can physically see the roots grow, but we'll have to give that a little bit of time before we do that, because the remaining cuttings on the plant aren't really big enough at the moment. I don't want to stress the plant too much by taking too much of it off. There wasn't much on there to begin with, to be honest. So there we go, the start of the project. We've got a nice solid base. It's straight up. It's as small as you could possibly get, I imagine, but I think in the long term it will be a really interesting project to see how this grows. And if you're interested in following along with me, I'll put some links down below where you can grab yourself one of these as well, and then maybe we can do this together and see if we can create an interesting and fun project. All right, that's it for this one. Please give it a thumbs up if you found it useful, and I will catch you very soon on another video. Bye for now.